Well, now that that's over with, we can finally move along to discussing several slight improvements to the game's quality of life improvements, and just minor and not so minor changes, as well as a brand new gameplay mode I concocted. Then move along to my ideas for future updates. First off, it's definitely going to be on Source 2, as that's a no-brainer, and apparently the developer tools are also God tier level, amazing to boot. This may seem kind of weird and obvious, but the whole thing when the character is on a moving platform in TF2 and they start walking as the platform moves should definitely not be a thing in this game, which most likely it won't be, but it's just one of those little annoying things from the older game that I don't know why it's there, but I want it to be removed. Just more of the jankiness of Team Fortress 2, I suppose. Maybe having it to where taunts can be used underwater and in midair, just for some extra amusement and to antagonize opponents and players in general. There was something Valve was working on to basically eliminate lag and keep up FPS no matter what somehow, and I wonder if they've abandoned it. It's Valve, so probably yes. Or is it still on the back burner where the system can be implemented into this game so that Team Fortress can finally run incredibly smoothly no matter what? And so all the PC elitist douchebags can run it at like 120 FPS or 220 or whatever is the standard nowadays for hardcore asswiped snobs. Valve was also working on a system for dynamic animation and dynamic level randomization, which can shift at will, which I know what you're thinking. But it's not going to be a level, but I was thinking something including bots. Not the bad kind, dear God. The official kind so they can compensate in real time for the new movement system, making them better at playing the actual game against real players so you won't be completely screwed when they're on your team. Now on to the custom game modes that won't be official but fan created, but they will have pre-created systems implemented and to be used by the modders to make them better. Because let's face it, most suck pretty hard right now if I'm going to be completely honest. Basically modes like Death Run, Freak Fortress, Zombies, the Medic Engineer version, and Jail will have special assets, settings, and abilities to make them easier to implement and to actually fix the broken-ass gameplay modes, making them actually fun to play for everyone. Starting off with Death Run, my personal favorite, the boss will of course be Olivia Mann in all of her 1980s businesswoman giant shoulders glory. And there will be no longer running around behind two-way glass, essentially awkwardly pressing badly designed buttons, with the boss being inside a single room instead. There will be a special building in the form of a desk with multiple monitors that the boss will interact with right-click popping up a menu. This will display camera angles of the various traps and a mini-map with dots displaying where all of the enemy team is, which may just be on the boss's HUD. These cameras will not be actual cameras, mind you, more like just game cameras, with probably multiple angles and multiple screens to give you a better view of the enemy team, and a little text blurb describing what the trap actually does. So you're not freaking lost the first time you use it, and a visual display only viewable by the boss in the menu of outlines of where the trap actually triggered by colorful shapes, as well as the center of the trap so you know where to hit the enemies past the point of no return. Maybe there'll be cycling images somewhere like a little GIF to show you the trap triggering to also help you, as well as augments being turned off so no more demo charging or spies cloaking, as well as there being a new set of weaponless animations, so no more gliding around standing completely still, so every class can be completely weaponless, giving them no advantage. Also, the boss will have lower health, so you don't have to have crits on all the time, as they can get pretty annoying. Onto Boss Mode, or formerly known as Freak Fortress, which will now feature updated freaks with the updated graphics and design, choosing the fan favorites, as there's quite a lot, such as Vagineer, Brutal Christian Sniper, Pain is Cupcake, and etc., with me imagining a short comic of like a daytime talk show where the engineer is being interviewed about his bastard creation Vagineer, who just wants him to accept him as his son. So one of those trashy Jerry Springer ripoffs that tried to be less low rent that was big in the 80s and 90s. Yes, the indication is that most of the bosses from Freak Fortress were probably created by the TF2 engineer Dale Conager and the TF2 medic Dr. Ludwig, and now the TF Neon crew has to deal with it. The boss's abilities and controls will be overhauled because the originals are complete and total fucking ass. Seriously, I hate playing as the damned bosses. They control so terribly. Hold crouch and look up to super jump? Who thought that was a good idea? So super jump will be a simple button press with a cooldown, as well as every boss having an EMP type attack in the form of a large sphere they can shoot in any direction, or something similar to disable engineer buildings and augments, and maybe even medic invincibles, as well as a massive AoE several dozen feet across that can go through walls to stop the ridiculous turtling that goes on in boss mode, and a myriad of projectile-based attacks to deal with annoying scouts and far-off enemies. No random crits either, just the boss having lower health, as that's kind of ridiculous and also annoying to just have always on. Also maybe a teleport where the boss spawns out of the arena and can choose on the map where they can teleport, seeing where all the enemies are, to avoid getting swamped and to do sneak attacks. I'm basically going for the boss having the advantage, as they should, and the enemy team should work together as a team. That way the boss is actually fun to play as, instead of a chore and frustration. As for zombie mode, the one based off the medic engineer, not those other weird versions, as I don't know how those work too well. But the medics will be replaced by custom zombies, which after a certain time, they don't either get a kill on the engineer or inflict any damage or destroy a dispenser. Newer zombies will be unlocked, slightly stronger, kind of like Left 4 Dead, with some variants specifically designed to deal with destroying buildings or lobbing long-range attacks into enemy positions. And maybe the engineers will have specific buildings to help block out zombies and get to higher places, with the zombies themselves unlocking special jumping variants or straight up flying variants if they can't reach the engineers. As for the jail mode, it'll have the weapon and augment disable feature, with maybe like a special mode exclusive melee weapon like a shiv that can be picked up by the prisoners. The guards, however, will have a PDA either as an extra weapon or augment, allowing them to communicate to the prisoners or other guards without having a mic, doing things like giving orders to the guards or prisoners. This could also work with the prisoners themselves once they won a game, with the winner selecting their prize without using the clunky old menu or communicating directly. And I forgot about Prop Hunt, one of my personal favorites that no one plays. But obviously the Pyro's ability to fly will come from an augment they can switch on and off, no more clunky controls, and maybe they can switch to their normal augment once the final scout is left and can defend themselves. And the scout's ability to change to the prop will probably be an augment too. I also forgot to mention crafting earlier and at the beginning, although I was going to mention it later on, but of course it will be much more simplified without the ridiculous dragging and dropping of every single component required. A simple menu system selecting all of the extra weapons and none that you have actually equipped unless you choose so, with there being drag and drop menus for selecting only certain items. However, when it comes to actually getting new weapons, augments, skins, and certain cosmetics in updates, they're going to be automatically given to the player with no need to wait around for them to be manually dropped randomly. I know that may screw up the economy, but from what I've heard, it's mostly buying keys and selling crates, so it won't really matter, and I really don't want it any other way, goddammit. The waiting around to get items or doing the stupid missions, I'll cover them soon. It's just not appealing, and I don't care how bad it screws up the freaking economy. You can kiss my ass, I'm not having it that way anymore. Fuck your damn economy. I'll make it a goddamn pay-for game, no longer free to play, so I don't have to fucking use the old shitty broken system, you hear me? You hear me? Well, that got intense. I'm sure eventually there'll be enough extra cosmetics and weapons to have a drop system for a crafting system that will actually be intuitive to use and maybe encourage players to use it. Also, I don't know about the contracts other than make them less freaking repetitive and maybe have it to where you don't have to have the stupid pop-up unless you have the goddamn tracker equipped, as that's just obnoxious. Well, now on to the special new gameplay mode that will be launched on day one, that will be ripped straight out of the 1980s, that I think very much will appeal to players now, more than any other new gameplay mode added to Team Fortress 2. Appealing to a certain nostalgic sense of wonder, and based off of a very nerdy pastime booming in the 1980s. A very long time ago, a very powerful wizard was betrayed in his own home by being framed for murder. The murder of Tom Jones. This sorcerer, going by the name of Marasmus the Magician, spent many years in jail where horrible things were done to him mentally and physically. This hardened his heart and turned his soul black with hatred. Now, using his vast knowledge of mysticism, he's concocted a trap especially made for the Manco mercenaries, hidden in a perfect location where they would never suspect a thing. It's a small out-of-the-way magic shop downtown. But in this tiny corner store made out of brick and cheap Halloween decorations, the powerful wizard has concocted a truly diabolical trap, using ancient reality-bending magic to turn a simple board game into a living fantasy of doom. In other words, it's a cooperative campaign with branching levels based in a high fantasy setting inspired by Dungeons and Dragons with Marasmus as the dungeon master. Essentially, you play in a single-player style level, which will probably be the same size as the normal levels, but not mirrored like multiplayer-centered ones. Although Team Fortress Neon levels will be much larger due to facilitating the new movement abilities and way more flanking routes, so they'll be pretty big. The levels themselves will be based off of high fantasy, so running around in like castles, dungeons, dark ancient forests, and dingy caves, and whatever else I can rip off of D&D, with you and your team being able to choose different levels based off the exit, with multiple exits, hence multiple levels and branching paths. You will find a variety of mythical creatures and monsters ripped straight out of tabletop folklore, but stylized to the Team Fortress universe, with each enemy monster serving some purpose to counteract certain classes and playstyles, or being simple cannon fodder or bullet sponges. With each level you enter, it will be a variety of either puzzles, platforming, pure combat, survive waves of enemies, fighting a boss, find a hidden item, with mixing and matching of these many scenarios. Also definitely traps, I forgot to mention, as I'm pretty sure that's a D&D thing too. There will also be choices with a pop-up dialogue menu you can choose from, with certain events in certain rooms ripped straight out of the comic for Screen Fortress 7. Like if one player gets to a magical crystal item somewhere in the map, they can choose to pick it up with something happening. Probably something horrible. Of course, being based off of Dungeons and Dragons, you can roll the dice either through an action item of dice in one of those dice rolling boards or in the main menu, which will cause something positive or negative to happen, narrated by Marasmus. Such as maybe the player getting crits, a health bonus, all of their shots auto-tracking to enemies, or has a negative, a massive decrease in their health, permanently locked very low. Being put into a stunned state, unable to use weapons, or maybe being turned into like a frog, being completely helpless, or spawning in a bunch of high-powered deadly enemies. The choice is yours to take the risk. Also, there'll be items you can pick up to give you bonuses, like extra weapons and magical amulets you can manage in your menu, as well as an actual RPG system, kind of like in SFM, but you don't have to go somewhere to level up, doing it in the main menu. And it will be based more like the typical tabletop RPG system, but obviously restarted with every match. And I don't exactly know how does death work in D&D, but I don't think players exactly would like to sit around in spectator for however long it may take to get through the match. Maybe they could respawn at the next level, but with stat decreases, not going into the negatives, of course. Maybe they could be a ghost moving around until they get like a magical item to respawn them, but then again they may ruin traps and ambushes that way. Who knows, I'm sure someone will figure something out. Also, I need a name, as it can't be gargoyles and gravel, as that wouldn't really make sense in Team Fortress Neon. Maybe like creatures in caverns? Maybe too close to Command and Conquer being CNC. Maybe it could be like enemies and empty places? Beasts and bases? Freaks and freaky places? Monsters and mazes? I think I've heard that one before. We may just have to go with gargoyles and gravels after all, and there will be a free version, and the paid version will just be buying a ticket to Marasmus's magic shop, where you could win certain cosmetics and unusuals, and even a neon-based weapon, being very much like Australian weapons, except they glow and come in different colors. Also, there will be different updates to this mode, based off of different tabletop RPGs and settings, kind of like Asian folklore, Arabian Nights, science fiction, post-apocalyptic, changing up the various monsters and levels designs, giving you new settings and scenarios to experience. And finally onto the future updates. Now you know this is imaginary because it's a Team Fortress game getting updates. With me concocting many possible updates for Team Fortress Neon as I present the best I've come up with. The first update, of course, will be the most important, the first Scream Fortress update. Although maybe not the first one, as this is kind of involved, but I suppose it depends on when the game would theoretically be released. Maybe the first major Halloween update with some minor ones beforehand. The update will contain 3 new maps and some Halloween cosmetics, as well as a special all-class skin based off of the Voodoo Cursed Souls from TF2, but sufficiently 80ized with the zombie forms of the mercenaries looking straight out of the Return of the Living Dead. So you know, incredibly decayed and decrepit looking, so totally fucking awesome looking. The first map will be based off of Friday the 13th, basically a forested campground similar to Slasher. It will be a King of the Hill map filled with references to both Friday the 13th and general horror, with one special feature inspired by the very franchise it's based off of. Essentially a mini-boss, which won't really act like a boss, but quite the opposite. This enemy called Jimmy, based off of course Jason, will be a hockey mask wearing, overly muscular, tall and wide monster in a jumpsuit, which will stalk lone players around the map once summoned. His footsteps will be silent, with him wielding a large machete doing 100 damage per hit, with him having 1000 health. Once spawned into the map, there will be a notification informing all players and a visual indication of him rising out of the lake near to the main point as a heads up. From then on, he will run around the outskirts searching for lone players, with plenty of special flanking routes only used by him to get the drop on unsuspecting mercenaries. However, he can go into an astral mode where he despawns and can observe all of the players on the map, seeking out lone players a certain distance away from other players that have been facing a certain direction for a certain amount of time and are out of line of sight, so he can spawn in his normal form and take them out. Essentially, he's not really a boss, more of an obstacle, literally acting like the character he's based off of, picking off lone players all by themselves, sort of forcing either players to stick together or be constantly watching their backs. And he will back off from fights, making him harder to kill. But when in astral mode, after a certain time has passed, his parameters will change to where he'll get more aggressive, with this increasing the more time passes until finally, if none of the parameters are met, he'll sort of go into a rage mode, going after the players on the main point. His eyes will probably glow red when he's in the rage mode, and if you do manage to kill him, you'll get a special weapon that will be given to all players after Scream Fortress is over, but it won't be as aesthetically pleasing than if you got it the legitimate way. It's an all-class melee weapon that will be a bloody machete, silencing the player's footsteps and giving mini-crits when attacking from behind, but making the player take more melee damage when equipped. and the one you'll get if you don't beat him will functionally be the same, just looking like a cheap Halloween prop. The second map will be based off of a Japanese city, filled with references to Asian horror, being a control point map, being a 5-point capture map, much like Granary and Well. It will be a square map in the middle of a downtown, filled with skyscrapers, with back alleyways at its edges, with subway tunnels and flooded sewers, at the side of a very large hill overlooking a city skyline at night, on one side, with the other being hillsides going up to Mount Fuji. One team's spawn point will be a haunted school with a curving road leading up to the map, and the other will be a haunted house mirrored on the other side, with both also filled with references to Asian horror. Much like the first map, there will be special enemies based off of Asian ghosts patrolling the map. One will be based off of the Japanese spirit Teke Teke, which is the ghost of a schoolgirl cut in half, being only her upper half, that cuts people in half with her long fingernails. She will patrol around the back alleyways that are the outskirts of the map, looking for lone players walking on her hands. Encountering her is a one-hit kill and you cannot damage her, as she can go through both teams, and this intangibility goes for the other two also. So essentially she's a buzzsaw with AI that sticks to one area. But there's only one of her, and she'll switch between the different parts of the map's alleyways randomly unless she spots someone. Then upon killing them she'll stick around to see if anyone else comes. The next one will be based off of a Chinese water ghost, the Swang Gui, which will hang out in the flooded sewers and around the central point, which will be on a small island in the center of a roundabout. The sewers will be a direct access to the center point and each point through tunnels, enticing players to use the shortcut. However, the lone Swang Gui, being the spirit of a drowned person, can yank out the player's soul and take control of their body. The player will be stuck as a new special ghost model for each mercenary, as an AI controls their body for at least a minute, with the player being invisible to other living players, and their possessed body having green glowing eyes and speaking in Chinese phrases. The possessed body will actually try and help their team before dropping dead after the minute has passed, with the Sway Gui being set on a respawn timer, allowing the ghost player to respawn. Yes, there will only be one of her, but she too will switch between the different sides of the sewer, and she will be a schoolgirl just like the Teke Teke, with her probably giving a verbal indication, like saying something creepy in Chinese, and she'll probably glow, so you'll know she's coming in, so the player has a chance to run. The last but not least won't randomly patrol an area as an obstacle, but instead emerge during key conditions to break up stalemates and one team completely dominating the other. It will be a ghost based off of Thailand and Buddhist folklore, the Prita, hungry ghost, which is basically a 20-foot tall, emaciated, eternally hungry spirit of a greedy person with a long tongue and small mouth. And yes, this too will be a schoolgirl, who will also pass through players like the other two, but straight up just run about the map, killing players for a set amount of time, as you can't hurt her, to balance things out during certain moments. Essentially, if certain conditions are met, such as the central point getting capped repeatedly, in a pseudo-stalemate she'll spawn in. Or if one point doesn't get touched by an enemy player for a certain amount of time, with no enemies getting close to it, she will spawn in near the players defending the point to break through the defense, but she'll still target all players. Or if one team captures enough points fast enough with no players attempting to block the points being captured, she will spawn in to try and slow down the stomping by the advancing team. So you'll be playing with angry female ghosts on this map, so you better keep an eye out. Also, they are based off of schoolgirls, as creepy little girls, especially schoolgirls, tend to be a thing in Japanese horror, so that's why. And no way in hell would any of these ghoulish girls be cute, especially considering one is cut in half and the other is some stretched out freak, so no fan service for you weirdos. Finally, the third map will be based off of Stephen King's book The Mist, with the map being set in a small Maine town, like most of his books, which will be filled with Stephen King references. The map will be a special variant on Payload, which will feature the car from the movie's finale as the cart with blacked out windows. However, this cart can take multiple paths and even go backwards, with the team pushing it getting to choose which path it takes. Yes, it'll technically still be on a track. There will just be multiple paths to choose, and you can go back on yourself, getting more time once you hit another checkpoint. Even going backwards, but there definitely will be a limit with the time you get if you hit the same checkpoint over and over again, decreasing to discourage long games. So no yo-yoing between the point indefinitely, or eliminating never-ending backtracking through this method. Also, you'll be on a road with some kind of indicator for where the track is supposed to be, as you are in a car after all, and the way you vote when you hit a crossroads or go back is just stand in the direction close enough to the cart, with possibly there being a visual indicator on the ground to vote in which direction to go. And if it's undecided, it'll just idle there until a decision is made. The map itself, of course, won't be covered in fog, at least not generally, but the outsides will be surrounded by foggy landscapes, with even a certain giant monster appearing in the background from time to time. However, occasionally fog will cover the map, and monsters, based more off the book monsters, will appear to harass the mercenaries, with the fog effect working similar to the second Halloween map, which is to either break up stalemates or slow down a team, either capping too quickly or blocking too hard, with it perhaps just randomly happening from time to time also. The monsters will go as followed, with there being 3 variants. One being the giant bug monsters the size of big dogs that will spray acid web that slow and damage players, as well as infect them with a bite that will be lethal, taking a few seconds to kill you, and unleash small hatchlings that will run out and damage nearby players. The second variant will be the much larger crustacean monster that will do massive melee damage and be relatively slow. The third and final will simply just be a tentacle reaching out from the fog, hovering near the edges of the map that'll grab a hold of players, attempting to pull them outside of the map. You can fight back by damaging the tentacle while in its grasp, possibly freeing yourself, but as soon as you hit the map's edge, you will instantly die, exploding into a bloody mess. And on a final note for this first Scream Fortress, as for the gargoyle or whatever you will get to unlock certain Halloween cosmetics, it'll probably just be some decrepit bloody journal or something similar. Acting as the gargoyle, which won't have the stupid heads-up display unless you have it equipped, but it won't have to be just like the gargoyle. Or maybe just like I originally had planned, just remembering now, you won't have to do any of that, and can just play on the map, having the cosmetics randomly drop with no extra bullshit required. There'll also probably be crates that give you special cosmetics only from crates, as well as the normal ones with unusual effects. Moving along to a few minor updates before some big ones. There will be of course a Smithmas update, but much smaller, with me not really thinking of any maps for this update, but thinking up a brand new gameplay mode, sort of like Escort, featuring a plucky 80s blonde female reporter as the civilian you'll be escorting. I've just not thought of any maps for it. So it will probably be called Escort, as I accidentally wrote in the wrong mode originally, as it won't be a player-controlled character but an AI one, which the team will move around kind of like a cart but free range, standing on a circle, surrounding her, guiding her around the map. She obviously can't be damaged or killed, but you can shoot at her feet to make her run slightly faster for a short period of time, but this will build up a slow meter called the fear meter. That will slowly drain, but if it reaches maximum, she'll panic and run off in a random direction for a brief amount of time. Also, just in case there'll be a teleport feature, if somehow she gets stuck, with probably some confused dialogue from the reporter and the announcer. More importantly, there'll also be several weapons from Team Fortress 2 finally added, such as the flare gun, the Kritzkrieg, and Dead Ringer all properly reskinned to fit TF in, with like the Dead Ringer being a holographic generator held in the spy's hand, and the body could be explained as a holographic projection. And like the Kritzkrieg would just be another magic book called something like the Crit Storm, or maybe something more witty, who knows. Note a lot of the older TF2 weapons will come back in future updates, either simply just as reskins, acting identical to how they did in the prior game, or much more extensive overhauls. And there will be probably a few new one-off weapons added, also like a minigun for the heavy I just thought of that does extra damage but has to be deployed and stuck to the ground, so you can't move and shoot at the same time, only having a limited range when shooting unless you pick it up and move it manually to get a better angle. As well as a special all-class melee weapon I just remembered I thought up, which will be based off of stereotypical Christmas toys from decades ago, such as an old doll, toy train, nutcracker, which will operate like the typical all-class melee weapon, but have the special effect of the holiday punch, where hitting an enemy from behind will make them do the laugh taunt. And of course plenty of Christmas-themed cosmetics and unusuals to go along with the update. There will be an April Fool's update, not immediately but at some point, adding joke weapons such as a melee weapon for the heavy, where it's just two piles of poop over his fists, where upon hit it will give the enemy the gyrate effect, or the whine effect to be more accurate to the game, but will also give the same effect to the heavy when wielding. I can see a funny poster where he's got these on his fists, making a horrible face as the other mercenaries run away. There'll also be an all-class revolver secondary where simply pressing the fire button will make the player taunt, then shoot themselves in the head, killing themselves. It can be called the Emo's Escape Plan. Another special secondary will be a metal box that goes over the player's head, blocking 100% of headshots and damage to the head, but slowly suffocating them and blocking 100% of their vision. The suffocation will be slightly longer than drowning, and take a few seconds to actually start, as it is a box full of air after all. And your viewpoint will just be black minus the HUD. And that's all I've come up with so far for the April Fool's update. Now on to the first major non-holiday update, being based off of ancient Asian folklore, and mostly 1980s interpretation of Asian high fantasy, with multiple alt classes and alt weapon loadouts for every class, and multiple brand new maps. First off, I do have all of the weapons and augments planned out. I've been working on them for months in my head, but since this thing is way too fucking long already, I'll probably just write them down in another upload to save time. But some of the map ideas I have, such as a bunch of flying ships based off of ancient Asian vessels way up in the clouds. Note these are mostly vague ideas, and this particular map I could imagine having multiple game types in it. Another one being an emperor's palace at night with fireworks going off, being either payload or payload race. I'd like the map to be dark as it's night, and maybe the fireworks could light up certain areas in certain intervals, which may be neat, or maybe just have to be scrapped just to have a nice looking skybox in a night-themed map. Another one was a 7-layer payload map, with each layer representing one layer of the Buddhist version of hell, all being in the same area, making it a very vertical map. Just think of it like a 7-story building with me imagining a large hole in the middle, with the map being in the shape of a stack of donuts that you're pushing the cart down to the bottom layer. So you could jump between the layers using the hole in the center, but there'll probably be a lake of fire at the bottom that'll set you on fire and damage you when submerged or touching the fire like a flamethrower. There'll also be another variant of Escort featuring a grumpy mystical Asian princess with her fear bar working differently, but instead of her running off in random directions, she will pout walking off in random directions with a higher tolerance for being shot at, with a slower cooldown once it's full. She'll also be in the cart in a cage in the hell level, like you're dragging her down to the Buddhist version of the devil, or some form of Asian devil-like god. And her name will probably be a bunch of Asian words from different languages, calling her a spoiled brat or something. There'll definitely be other maps and a plethora of cosmetics and special skins for each class to fit the theme. And I also imagine some extra new special types of taunt, at least one for this update and one for the next one, where you can actually interact while taunting. Where you can basically get into a Pokemon battle based off of the 3 starters from the original game, sufficiently changed of course to avoid copyright and be comedic. Each player will choose their attack and one of the 3 fighting just like in the game, but with the monsters battling it out between the mercenaries, taking turns like in the turn-based RPG. Next up is the space-themed update, or to be more accurate, the science fiction update, featuring sci-fi adjacent themes as well as space. It will of course include brand new full loadouts for all classes, consisting of some pretty radical ideas, with most of them being alt classes, with maybe like one alt loadout. Yet again, I will explain this in a future project, probably in the same script as the folklore update, as I do have all of the weapons and augments planned out, also minus some smoothing out here and there. However, I do have another new gameplay mode taking place in a spaceship with several iterations. The first one being has one team you're running around the spaceship doing random tasks based off of other objective modes such as capturing an area, gathering objects like in player destruction, moving one item from one side of the ship to the other like capture the flag or payload. Basically, you would be in a ship racing around space as the story, either repairing your ship from taking damage or keeping it running. As the enemy team spawns in on the outskirts like they're on an enemy ship attached or being teleported into parts of the ship. Another variant is sort of like that final mission in the Fallout 3 DLC Mothership Zeta, where you'll be controlling the ship sort of, but mostly encountering certain phenomena in space on a view screen, and being announced where you have to do a certain task, like the first variant, to prepare for said phenomenon. Like there's an asteroid belt up ahead, so you have to stand in a certain area, essentially capping it to transfer power to the shields. Maybe there's a supernova, so you have to move power cores from one side of the ship to the other to power up the engines. Maybe there is a mysterious alien ship. You have to move a cart from one part of the ship to another to power up your weapons, while the whole time the enemy team is trying to stop you. Your ship will have a health bar seen in the main room, probably near spawn, or inside of it, so there's margin for error, and these events will be randomized for this version and the first. The last variant, actually 2 technically, the first one being both teams have a ship and are competing in like a race, with both teams being able to go over and fight the other. The second would be 2 ships fighting each other, with both teams being able to board the enemy ship or stay and work on theirs, with the goal being to destroy the other ship. Obviously the maps won't actually be moving, just having fancy graphics on display screens, and occasional screen shaking for players, and like images on windows matching the view screen. Moving on to the other maps, I think I forgot most of them over the past 4 years of thinking this up or so, but what I can vaguely remember is one was going to be a reskin of the TFN 2 fort, looking very similar to a futuristic high-rise from like the Fifth Element or that one Star Wars planet covered in a city. Another was going to be a space station featuring the entire map, where you can even go to a special control room guarded by ceiling-mounted turrets and other defenses, which would attack both teams, but you could, once reaching the control panel, manipulate certain things like gravity, air supply, cutting off areas in certain parts of the map. Or you could just destroy the power core, cutting off gravity, lights, and life support for a brief amount of time before it's fixed, as well as the control panel, eventually locking you out before restarting after a cooldown period. There would be yet another variant of escort featuring an alien princess who can actually heal the team escorting her and attack enemies with her fear bar, making her go into a rage once fully charged, meaning she'll attack both teams. And this will probably be on a very 1920s style science fiction map, kind of like out of The Princess of Mars or something similar. along with plenty of other maps someone else could think of, and science fiction themed cosmetics, with another special taunt where you can basically play a Game Boy, and actually play minigames, which will be great for passing the time in like death run matches. And there could be like future games added to it you could play, with me even imagining like platformers, or something like Pokemon, dramatically scaled down of course. With me not quite deciding if this taunt should go with the former update or this one, because of which theme would fit better. Now on to the two last updates I could think of. Technically three, but more on that soon. Which if this somehow miraculously becomes a game, I'm sure there'll be plenty of more thought up by other people, but my imagination is basically spent for now. Of course I just remembered I did have ideas for other Screen Fortress updates. One idea in particular would feature Marasmus as the main antagonist, with it like being called Marasmus's Revenge or something similar to sound cheesy. There could be a map sort of like Ghost Fort, not with the infinite boss, that is, meets Laser Train Sawblade or whatever it's called, where Marasmus occasionally will alter the map, adding deadly hazards such as bonus ducks, which will act like the krill from Gears of War, essentially covering certain sections of the map with lines of shadows, where the ducks would be flying up above, and if the player stepped in the shadows, the ducks would fly down, doing massive damage, killing the player in seconds. Just like in Gears of War and some other wacky yet deadly concepts done better than the typical spin the wheel magic spells in the last couple of updates. Of course there will be a magic spell Screen Fortress, adding certain spells, upgrading others, and removing dumb ones at some point. But on to an actual major update. Another idea I had in my head was essentially trying to force teamwork by adding new mechanics and special augments that would reward players for working together or giving to their teammates. I only have the vaguest of ideas, like a special item that takes up a weapon slot that allows the player to give other classes certain bonuses through like a taunt that they have to accept. Like maybe the pyro could give flame bullets temporarily to other classes, or the sniper giving long range bonuses. Or maybe entirely new weapons could only be equipped on the battlefield through this system, and would only last shortly, rewarding cooperation. Another special feature of this update would be skins that make the Team Fortress Neon mercenaries look like and sound like the Team Fortress 2 mercenaries, giving them all new voice lines so as you could play as the old mercenaries. Kind of like certain skins in Injustice giving you new characters. Neat, isn't it? But finally I feel as though there needs to be a final story update, ending the story of the game, creating closure. Us Team Fortress 2 players can't relate, sadly. Finishing the saga of Olivia Mann, her corporation, and secret battle with the mercenaries and Miss Polly for the fate of the world. Obviously there could be future updates, but they couldn't take place within the main story, not being connected, or take place in the past, or just not involve the story at all, adding new content but not mentioning the main plot. And the story will definitely have to end on December 31st, 1999, in keeping with the theme of the game, and it will definitely have to come out between 5 to 10 years after the game is released, as not to drag on indefinitely like its predecessor, which probably won't ever get an actual story conclusion if we're being honest with ourselves. But I have thought up another update after the main story concludes called the Afterlife Update or something similar. And yes, this sort of spoils the endings with how it turns out for the mercenaries. But there could be plenty of weird and wacky new weapons and augments and maps, as well as cosmetics to go with this update, not restricted to the already loose rules of the normal game world. Not to mention the return of dead antagonists throughout Team Fortress, probably being the main villains. Well, that was freaking long! Both in length and time it took me to finish it, but at least we're finally done. I just love Team Fortress 2 so much, which is why I had so many ideas for its sequel I've been thinking over for years, culminating in Team Fortress Neon. Being as thorough as possible, learning so much about TF2 over the years, adding and subtracting from my ideas, improving them along the way. I don't actually expect anything to come out of this, with this mostly just being me getting this off my chest, which I may have stated before, and it's not like I could remotely begin to make something like this come to be. It's just a nice thought experiment, and sort of a tribute to Team Fortress 2 itself, and just adding to the Discord and putting my ideas out there. But if somehow, by some miracle, someone did decide to make this into a game, I suggest taking it slow and avoiding pitfalls like Kickstarter until you have maybe proof of concept or a working beta. As I heard, someone had to give back like $100,000 to the Australian government for some kind of loan or something similar for their game. So maybe like start creating it in like Source 1 or whenever they release Source 2 for public use, or even maybe Sandbox. Although I hear that's kind of hard, and especially since they are having trouble just trying to recreate TF2 in Source 2 and in Sandbox, and TFN is way more ambitious. So other options may be making it in like Unreal Engine, then showing it to Valve as proof of concept, so you could rent out the IP, has not to give it to them to let it rot. So hope you enjoyed my little theoretical sequel to Team Fortress 2, and maybe someday we'll get an actual sequel either by Valve or someone else making a similar game, or convincing Valve to let them make the sequel instead. So farewell for now.